All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. I want to thank you for sticking it out to the last session of the conference. So, welcome. This session is entitled Small Programs, Big Projects, Practical Tips and Tools for Managing Your Team. So in this session, we want to go over things to help you manage your team and your projects when you don't have someone designated on your staff to be your project manager. And so my name is Ladidra McKinney. I am a staff attorney at Michigan Legal Help. While I'm a staff attorney, I do content development as far as our toolkits and articles and things like that, but I'm also A to J and Hot Docs developer, so I do that work as well for our automated documents. And I've also served as in the project manager role for a TIG that we had, helping not only our state, but states around the nation migrate their A to J interviews from the 4 platform to 6. And this is Emily.
I'm Emily Good. I'm with Legal Services State Support out of Minnesota, and my job title is Pro Bono Projects Manager, and before that I was just a project manager. I'm also a lawyer. I'm probably more of a lawyer than a project manager, so if anybody in this room is like, I don't know much about project management, I don't know that I did either at one point. But we've done a couple of website redesigns of Law Help MN, of our Minnesota Legal Advice Online, migrating both of those to Drupal platforms, and I was one of the people involved in leading and coordinating both of those projects.
Great. Thank you. And so we do also want to share with you the sizes of our team so you can get a sense of what we work with. So on my staff, there are 8 people, and that's including my boss, Angela Tripp. 4 are lawyers, and everyone else is not.
And our office at State Support is, I'm going to say it's 6.5 people. 7 real people, but one of those people is fully a content developer who doesn't really do any of our website or technology work, and we're nestled under a larger legal service organization, but nobody in our office is doing direct service. Our primary jobs all relate to coordinating services, including managing the websites for statewide legal services in the entire state of Minnesota.
All right, thank you. So we do want to encourage people to engage in the Twitter conversation with the hashtag and Twitter handles. So the first tool that I'm going to be presenting on is Trello, and some of you may be very familiar with this tool, and some may have not. The first thing I want to tell you about Trello is that it is free, and that's what we like in this sector, because a lot of programs, we don't have a lot of money to dedicate to outside tools. And it's basically an electronic Kanban board. And so I'm going to talk about Trello for your team. This is a screenshot of my team's Trello board, so you can see there's individual ones. So I have my own for the things that I personally work on, and then we have other Trello boards that are like our migration to Microsoft 365. And so there's multiple people working on that. All the workflow is on one board. So if you happen to work from home that day, you can see where everyone is, or you don't have to ask someone, hey, did you do this yet? Because it'll they will be able to check it off. You can create due dates, which is nice. You can create reminders. It has power-ups, which is really nice. So I'm very much a color coder, and I do all my content blocks, one color, and then I do my website maintenance things in a different color. And so you want to make sure that you're able to distinguish your different hats, and that's a good way to do so. So again, this platform is free for your users. You can have up to 10 people on a board, but the free version does only support 1 power-up. So if you're really into this and going to delve in with your team, I would suggest doing the business class. The business class is $9.99, which is still a very reasonable and affordable option for you. And then here is a snapshot of my personal Trello board, and as you can see, I use power-ups to have some color coordinating. I have my QAPs, which is my quality assurance on the content that I'm in control of. I have a different color for my interviews that I'm either developing, doing maintenance for, and things. I've set it up, that everything to the left is what I need to do. I try to plan for the next week, or maybe sometimes the next day, whichever works best for you. And that's my on deck column, what's coming down the pipe for me, and then in progress. This is also very helpful if you don't have the time in your day to do check-ins with your other staff members. Think about the time you go into someone's office and you really mean to just ask them, hey, did you do this yet? But then you start talking about, what did you do last night? And you're getting coffee and you're doing all these other things. So this is an easy way to be able to collaborate, know what's going on with you, not only your projects that you're doing yourself, but also with your team. The next one is Google Sheets. Again, free. I like it. It's cloud-based. I hardly ever take my work computer home, and so when I'm home, I use my personal computer, and that works perfectly with Google Sheets because I still can access everything that I need to access. And so, again, I am very heavily involved in our we call them DIY tools, but that's our automated documents. And so this is a screenshot of one of the main spreadsheet that we use. And so as you can see here, I can look at this, our outside developer that we contract with. It's very important because he works remote. We never see him. He doesn't even live in the state of Michigan. So we're able to easily collaborate not only with the developers, but then if you'll see there's an owner column, and that's gonna be our staff attorneys that don't do development work and they're only dedicated to content. And so I don't have to go back and forth with the other developer asking, so whose material is this? It's nice because you don't have long email trains of, is this interview live? Is it still in testing? Or anything like that. You can keep track of everything. And then when you think about maintenance of your library, which is very important, I can keep track of when was the last time that I looked to see if this form was up to date. Sometimes if you ask most programs like that, they'll say, well, I don't know the last time that we checked that form, and it's nice to have that in one place, and you can see at a glance, like when is it time to update. Also, it's hard to see right now because this screenshot, everything is green. So these are all live interviews, but in the event that I was testing, that top left corner that says live, that is actually a drop-down conditional, and so I can change that to go to QA. I can change that to testing. I can change it to ready for live, and things of that sort. So at a quick glance, I can see, is everything live? Do I have something that came back from QA and now is ready for me to make updates? And so it's an easy way to keep track, especially when you have a library as big as ours. We have 40 DIY tools. So you can imagine when we're migrating, half of that from A to J4 to A to J6, we had to come up with some concrete process to be able to make sure that everything was not only updated and we performed quality assurance, but that it got all the way to the 100% live on the website. We use feedback logs, and I'm going to talk about this in regards to DIY tools because that's mostly what I deal with, but you could do this with any other project as well. And it's basically when you want to get commentary or have review from multiple people. And so instead of having multiple versions in Word, what we have is, again, it's powered through Google, but it is a customized testing log. And so you just use a link and everything is live. Everyone's updates are all in the same place. You can use the @ or the plus symbol to @ a particular person. So for instance, if we have this is for a Multum for alternative sanction testing log. So this was a DIY tool that I created and I served as the developer. But I wanted not only the subject matter expert who wrote the script to test it, but I also utilized the other people in our office that are non-lawyers for testing because we like to try to get as many eyes on a tool before it goes live. And so when they open the link, there's a box that says, are you adding new test results. And if they click yes, they will get a fresh box that automatically populates the date. All they have to do is put their name and what browser. From there, they can notate. We usually use screenshots because that's the easiest way to figure out what page they are in an interview. And then they are able to notate any issues they had, any suggestions, any changes, and I'm able to keep track of who did what. And then we also have a system where I go back in and I don't erase. As you can see, I striked out so that I can keep track of my thought process, and if the law is ever changing. And in this project, one of the counties decided that they wanted to change their process before our tool went live, and I was able to go back to my previous notes, see why I did what I did, and update it so that the form would be accepted in that county. Again, this is very helpful because you have everybody's comments and feedback in one place. I don't have to worry about email strands. I don't have to worry about I know that so-and-so asked me to update this particular page, but what was it that they wanted me to change? And so it's easy for me just to go into this log and I can see everything. Also, it creates a communication flow so that I don't have to say, did my subject matter expert review it yet? I can go right in and I can take a look. Not to mention he or she can also at me, and then I will get an email straight to my inbox and let me know that there were more comments and feedback added. So we really enjoy this. And Emily's going to take over.
All right, and so we were talking a lot about Google tools, and one thing I just want to highlight that I think is a through line here is, especially for smaller projects where maybe you don't have a project manager or somebody who is not used to being a project manager, that something that is centralized and accessible to everyone so that you don't have information that's locked up in somebody's email account that's crucial or mission critical to what you need to know or do is one of sort of the key things underlying this project management for these larger projects, is so that a centralized location. Our office is on SharePoint, and so we really use a lot more of the Microsoft 365 suite. And let me just make one other quick note. One of my absolute favorite Amy Poehler quotes is "Good for her, not for me," and she talked about this in the context of just sort of like what one woman is doing is not necessarily what is going to be great for you in terms of comparison. And so I will say everything we're doing, this is what we're using and why we're using it and why it works for us. You might look at that and go, that totally doesn't work in my environment or in my situation. And so we're kind of hoping to present, obviously like a suite of tools, but take it or leave it. And when we do Q&A or discussion too, if you're like, why did you choose this or why didn't you choose this? We're, I think, really open to answering those questions as well. So we used OneNote a lot when we were building out and transferring our Law Help MN site. We use OneNote a lot for a number of different things where we are working across different staff members, and OneNote is basically a notebook. It's a fancy Microsoft notebook, and we also are now using it to track some of our internal site maintenance work and feedback that we are getting from our partners in different legal services offices around our state. We have about 18 or 20 different offices that we work with. And so in addition to just random people who might send us emails saying, hey, have you thought about putting this piece of content on your site? And so this is just a screenshot of our kind of OneNote setup. And one thing that we did, our Law Help site kind of has really different content buckets. And so what worked for us in terms of a sort of tracking those was to put them in different tabs. So Loon is our providers and clinics database. It's named after the state bird of Minnesota. The library, our guide, our triage. And so this way, if we get feedback from people or if we have ideas, we can put them in a centralized place. One thing, this is a terrible screenshot, but one thing that I want to highlight is both you can add to-do items, and we also use the same theory of striking through comments as opposed to deleting them once they've been dealt with, just because the strike through does allow you to go back and say, oh, okay, like, here's what happened with that, or, delete, but not actually delete. And one thing I love about OneNote is that from our email, you can just click on an email and add it to OneNote. And that's probably my absolute favorite feature because, again, in terms of, I hate having to go into a folder or somewhere else and like sift through like a ton of documents that are labeled email from so-and-so or email on this date. This way we can put it in the relevant page where it belongs. And so one way we're using this is to track like suggestions for content or suggestions for organizations that can be added to our site. If somebody emails that, we put it into the OneNote. And then also we're aspiring to a monthly or bi-monthly content review. And so then when we sit down, everything we need to consider is in one place. And then we can go through and assign who's going to review that. And so like we put just little check boxes. This is a screenshot from last March. We were looking at like 3 different possibilities of links to add. And then we included kind of our notes. So one of them was like, well, this isn't a great option. It's not the best. And so it's helpful for us if somebody comes back to us months later and says, oh, do you want to add this resource? Instead of us sitting around going, God, did we have that conversation? I think we had that conversation. Was that at a staff meeting? Yeah, I think it was. And trying to find like meeting notes when nobody remembers when it happened. This way it's topically organized. So that's kind of how we've used OneNote recently. And then during the project, we also used it. This is kind of similar to a feedback log, just in a different format. We built a triage system based on Michigan's, actually. And one of the things we did was to have legal topic experts from our legal aid offices review just for subject matter errors. They reviewed for a whole bunch of other things, but we really just needed their subject matter expertise. But so we could create a chart in OneNote to track that and sort of see when we were sending requests and also keep the sample language that we were sending out to people. So again, it was really centralized, and if you were offsite or insite, you could just like grab that sample email and see the review assignments, and the tracking is all on one page and one document. And so for us, just kind of the flexibility of OneNote to put different stuff on the same page was really, really useful. So don't mean to be like a Microsoft fan child, but it's worked very well for us. Something else we did in the process of our Law Help redesign project is what I call decision documentation. This is a very small tip and not a fancy deployment, but there were some places where we were making what we thought were fairly big decisions about things. And again, oftentimes those happen in a meeting. You have an hour-and-a-half long conversation. Maybe somebody takes notes. Maybe those notes end up in a meeting notes file. Or maybe you just make the decision and move on. And we felt that there were some things where either later on somebody was going to ask us, why'd you do it this way? Or where later on new staff might come on board and say, why are we doing it this way? And so we thought it made sense to document a few of those points where we could sort of identify that this, either we wanted to know in the future, or it had been such a lengthy conversation that we're like, good Lord, we need a record of the fact that we just spent all of this time. And I just screenshotted these notes because I'll give you a short description. For us, one of the biggest decisions, again, we are sending referrals to a lot of legal service programs, and we are just barely deploying online intake now. So it's funny to me that these notes are from April of 2018. But we had to decide, are we sending a referral to multiple organizations if somebody matches with if there's 2 places in Hennepin County, which is our biggest county, that could take housing, do they both get that intake, or does one of them get that intake? And we were like, okay, only one intake gets sent. We don't want multiples going out. That was one of the things that we decided. And then we were like, who picks? Does the user pick which organization, or are we picking for them? And so because that potentially carried a lot of political implications for the organizations that we would be sending intake through to, right? What's our decision mechanism? How would the system pick who to send an online intake form to? We wanted to make sure that we had written down what we'd done and why we'd done it, so that as we explained it in the future, or if we needed to revisit it, we would know why we had made that decision. So we'll see how that goes in the future. But we did it for big and small things, but this is kind of one of the bigger ones that we did. Then Basecamp, I'll just mention briefly, I believe this was talked about in an earlier session today. This is what we used with our developer. This was their tool for kind of tracking our website deployment and build. And it was very helpful, especially for communicating with our development firm, which was in the same city as us, but not co-located with us. And then they had developers who were off-site. And so it just had discussions. You could store files there, which was really helpful because our entire triage is built in a Google spreadsheet that lives here. And so it was a really good centralized place to be able to view documents, and you could see other people's discussions as well. So Basecamp now has, I mentioned this mostly, the version we used was not free. Basecamp now has a free version. I think it's for 3 users or fewer, and it's sort of designed for personal usage, not necessarily across a huge organization, but they do now have a free model, and I think it could be something that's really helpful, especially if you're coordinating people in multiple locations. It's a little different from Trello just because of how it handles discussions, to-do lists, and other things, and it also sends you notifications if you want them. So finally, I'll talk about the 15-minute stand-up, which you've probably heard of in other contexts. It's kind of a meeting strategy and a project management. People have a lot of different names for these. We used them in our office. My husband works for 3M, which is a major corporation, and he uses them. So basically, you get a group of people around really quickly who are on the same thing to say, kind of just a check-in. Like, what are you working on today? What are you planning to make progress on? What are you stuck on? We used it a lot in the early stage of the development of our new Law Help site because we were asking our developer to do something that they hadn't done before, and we had some good models to show them, but we were doing things a little bit differently. So we really did need to check in regularly as they were starting that build to say, here's what we have, they could say, here's where we have a question. Is this what you were thinking? Or we could be on the phone with them and they would say, let me screen share this with you quick and make sure before we spend 8 hours today doing this, that this makes sense. So it's really good to sort of check in and to that point about making sure people are on track or things that need to get pushed out are getting pushed out. And this is us standing around the computer because we would always do computer meetings with our developer. So the thing that is good about it is it allows you to really quickly figure out if something is stuck or hung up. It's not going to sit there stuck and hung up for a month before you have another check-in. You're going to know right away, and you can get quick collaboration and say, okay, you need my help or whatever else. And again, with our developer, it was great to be able to have these little conversations along the way instead of having a really big thing built and then find out that it totally didn't work and that they needed to redo a bunch of work. So that was the good thing. The less good thing is when it gets off topic. You want to keep it pretty tailored to what's happening with this XYZ project today, like what are you doing, very immediate. Ours got less helpful or less good when we had somebody join our team who had a lot of questions about background, about the technology, about things, and those questions would derail the rest of the stand-up. And so then we had this short meeting that was metastasizing and also kind of getting off of what it was supposed to be, which really was just what are we doing right now, what needs to get done for the next, in 2 days from now. So as long as you keep them to what they're intended to be, and I also think this is for what I would call a really active development phase. I was talking about this with my partner at home. He's using these on a bunch of projects in his office that he thinks they shouldn't be using them on because they are just long-term ongoing projects. And he's like, we don't need stand-ups like twice a week on this because this is just the work we do, right? And so if you are like pushing out a new A2J interview, this might be helpful. If you are redesigning a website or putting up a major change to something, this would probably be really helpful. I think just for managing day-to-day work and standard projects, probably the 15-minute stand-up, at least for us, would not work. So I'll back up. I want to take a moment. If people have any questions, raise your hand and I will come to you with a microphone for the recording.
My question is, with your little 15-minute stand-up idea, have you done those when you've had to work remotely with people, and are those just as effective in a digital setting?
Yes, we did. So our developer was remote when we did 15-minute stand-ups, and it worked. I would say it worked pretty well, but we only had one person there and then like 2 of us in the other location. But I think it would. I should just condition this and say, at most, we had 4 people on a stand-up. And so, like, I don't know how well it would work if you had, like, 8 or 10. Because, right, like, just in terms of how many people are trying to talk, that could be harder. But, yeah, it was, we did it using maybe Zoom. I don't even remember which conference.
What is the advantage of OneNote versus just a Google Doc or a document that just lists everything?
I think it's just the capacity and what you're used to using. If you have Microsoft and everyone in your office has the Microsoft suite, then go for OneNote. A lot of the different features are in both. You can tag people, you can color code things, you can underline in basically anything, even Notepad. So I just think it depends on your resources and what your team comfortable with using.
Yeah, and I will say, for me, the fact that, again, we're in the Microsoft ecosystem, so I think the fact that literally I use my mouse backwards, I can like right-click on an email and select send to OneNote, and so it just, for me, that's really fast. And some of the organizational features where we can nest things in such a way that I think instead of looking in a document folder where for some reason, for me, OneNote titles are easier to decode than when you get a folder of documents that are like, if you have a really good organizational system for titling those, great. But for me, sometimes people title stuff and I'm like, why can't I find this thing? And so OneNote for me and for us, I think relieved some of the like, where do I find the right thing? But it's totally a whatever works for you.
I would also add that we work with an outside developer, and sometimes you don't know what resources they have. So in your office, you may be able to provide your whole staff with Microsoft Suite, or but that doesn't mean necessarily your developer does. They might have a different version, or they may not have the Microsoft that has OneNote included. So Google is something pretty universal. It's free, and it's just a solid tool, and that's why we picked it, because we knew that whoever we worked with would be able to work with Google.
Is there I was going to ask, is there an equivalent of OneNote for Google, but you were just saying that?
I would say it's not exactly the same. The one thing, like Emily was saying, that's nice about OneNote is like the tabbing. You can get creative, and you can. One thing that we do with our master toolkits, so we have, 80 or so toolkits, and within each toolkit we have a DIY tool, articles, and so on. But we've created a table of contents where we have toolkit number 1 in wills and planning is I want to make a will. So you just click it, and then it'll take you to, page 76 that has all that material. So that kind of can serve as your tabbing system, which doesn't make, it doesn't take a lot of technological skill. I do want to share that. I don't have a technical background. I did a little bit in law school with document assembly, but beyond that, I don't. And so even when you think about the conditional spreadsheets that I shared, you can literally Google it, and it will give you step-by-step of how to make a condition with colors. So don't be intimidated by, well, I don't know how to do this. You literally can just Google conditional spreadsheets, and for the most part, it's just step-by-step.
And as I'm walking over, I'll just note that we also just used a spreadsheet to track a bunch of our timing stuff in our project, just an Excel spreadsheet.
I have seen Google has a program called Keep, which is kind of their notebook type application. It's not as robust as OneNote, but it is free. So that's a really good price.
Does anyone else have any questions before we move on to the activity? All right. Okay, so this is a workshop session, so we did just want to give you guys kind of an activity to work on. So I know we're more of in a lecture seating, but if you kind of want to just cluster with the people around you and think of a project that either you're working on right now, it's coming down the pipe, and think about how, the suite of tools that we just presented, how could you better manage that project using one of these things? And Emily and I will be walking around to kind of help facilitate those conversations. And if you don't have a group project in mind, we do have some examples. Off the top of my head, I can think if you wanted to migrate your a computer upgrade. Recently, we moved to 365 within the last month or so, and so we are Michigan Legal Help, and we are the statewide website, but in our building, we also have Legal Services of South Central Michigan, and we have Family Law Project, we have MERC, which is the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center, and so you're updating all of these computers, so how do you get that done? How do you not miss somebody? How do you make sure that Kelly's gonna be out for a week and a half, and we don't wanna forget about her computer? Something else, a DIY tool, that's the easiest. That's my background. So if you think about a new tool that you're interested in developing, that could be an option. Do you have any other sample projects?
Just another example, if I'm a part of a committee right now that's looking at pro bono sort of awareness in the state and how we make sure that people are connecting with pro bono resources. And so a task for that committee is planning out a project of like what are the first steps for what that committee needs to do in terms of both looking at our statewide pro bono website, but also other things, and then where do we go once we've made decisions about what steps to take. So that's a different and equally beastly project.
Yeah, so again, if you just want to cluster by the people around you, and Emily and I will kind of walk around and try to facilitate some conversation among you all.
Just a couple of things to highlight that other people said. Depending on what you're trying to deploy and with whom you're trying to deploy it, you may need buy-in, and that might be the hardest thing to get, is sort of an agreement to use a tool or a strategy to manage this and to get people to agree that they're going to check the thing or appear for the stand-up or update the document. And so just being aware that, again, good for her, not for me. Like if it's not going to work for your team, it's not going to work. Unless, as you said, it was just already existing and you just have to learn to use it. Like when we used Basecamp with our developer, that was just what they were using. So that was just what we used. No ifs, ands, or buts, but I think for other things, it's a bigger issue.
I think something else that you can do is, if you're not, to get buy-in, is maybe you don't start with your team. Maybe you start with yourself and you create a Trello board or a Google sheet for the specific things that you work on. Because I know, in this sector, we all wear several hats. We don't just do one thing. And so, for instance, I'm going to give a quick example of Trello. And so you start using it very regularly, and you learn the power-ups, and you show all the tips and tricks. The other 3 staff attorneys, they are not into technology as much as I am. They're a little bit farther removed from law school, and I kind of convinced them. I showed them with Trello, you can integrate it right with your email, just like with OneNote. So you don't have to do a lot of clicking around. When I showed them the different power-ups they can do and assigning things, and honestly, I went to my boss and I said, hey, can I have a 30-minute meeting? And she said, absolutely. And so instead of just saying, hey, this is a really good tool that we should use, I threw it up on a screen and I was like, look how cool this is. Look what I did. And they were like, oh, I thought it would be harder than that. And that was how I got buy-in. So maybe you just start with yourself, and then you can show the progress and how you were able to be efficient. And I think that's a good place to start. And also, if it's free, or if you already have it, that's a good way for people to not say no.
Also, somebody mentioned the tool Asana, A-S-A-N-A, which is similar to Trello platform. So I'll just highlight that out too, similar where you can put to-do lists and other things and share it with other people to be able to view that. And one thing we didn't mention, but I would be remiss not to mention it because I happen to like paper for certain things. And like when we were migrating 160 fact sheets from one site to the other site, we just printed out our list of all of those fact sheets and taped it to a door in our office and visually highlighted as they got uploaded and done, which was A, super satisfying. But B, it also just made it like people could just like walk past my door and look and say like, oh, I've got a couple of minutes, like there's 3 more tax fact sheets, I can grab those and do those. And so just not to forget that, or somebody mentioned that someone in their office or someone they know has a huge whiteboard. Sometimes like super analog things that are, as long as they're accessible to everybody who's involved in the project or needs to know, that might be the best way.
I would definitely agree. When we were developing our triage system, we had a huge whiteboard that was in our conference room, and we made a Kanban board, and we used sticky notes, different colors, and every person was a different color. So you would put the person and then the task, and it would kind of move along. And you know, when you have a project like creating a triage that's going to take years, it's nice to kind of just, it's satisfying, like Emily said, to just watch those sticky notes go all the way through the process and are then completed. So there's nothing wrong with physical or paper. All right. Well, if you guys don't have anything else for us, we just want to say thank you again for coming. We hope that you learned something. We hope that you have an array of tools that you can use, and cheers to efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you.